Today in Behind the Headlines, we're going to try to get you up to date on the latest developments in the Palo Alto school closure story. This has been a wild week, but we're very fortunate to have School Board President Todd Collins and Trustee Shanak Durap joining us, along with Elena Kadvani, our education reporter. This has been a fast-moving story. We're taping this at about 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Elena, bring us up to date on what happened earlier today.
So this morning, the Santa Clara County Public Health Department and County Superintendent of Schools announced that all schools countywide are going to be closing for 3 weeks starting Monday. So for Palo Alto, that means actually a month-long closure because it runs up right against when the spring break starts. And so in Palo Alto, it sounds like, we can get into this with you too, students will be getting some at-home learning, which had already been in the works since yesterday's emergency board meeting. It's not replicating in-person learning. It's just sort of what can be provided right now in terms of what students can have access to at home.
This was announced by the Public Health Director of Santa Clara County. Yes,
along with additional orders countywide banning gatherings, public or private, of more than 100 people. And for gatherings between 35 and 100 people, there are additional conditions for sort of how those can happen.
And this has the force of law. The Santa Clara County is imposing this requirement on all schools. It does, and it comes on the heels of many private schools in the county already having made that decision, and obviously also following the announcement in various other jurisdictions in California and beyond of other school closures. Any indication from today's announcement by the public health director as to what turned her mind around from just the last 48 hours, how that decision was reached?
She described just the rapidly increasing numbers of confirmed cases. I think it's now at 79 in the county, and that those numbers are going to continue to rise. So as another effort to try to slow the spread of the virus. And when she was talking about balancing this, the public health lens, which with the impact that school closures and all these other restrictions are going to have on just day-to-day life for people, she got a little emotional. I don't know if you
I noticed that. Yeah.
So obviously this is a difficult decision. She described how, these are not easy decisions to make. They don't have full information about the coronavirus. They're just trying to do what they can to stop the spread locally.
So, Todd, it was about 24 hours ago that you were running a board meeting at which the school board gave its endorsement. In essence, you didn't take any votes, but you acknowledged the direction that the superintendent was taking, which was to hold open the schools and to not encourage, but to provide some sort of learning opportunities for those families that wish to pull their kids out of the schools. What is your sense of how this changed so suddenly? What was going on behind the scenes between 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon and 11:30 this morning?
I think the district was as surprised as everyone else. We had some inkling last night that things were changing as more and more districts around the state and entire states around the country were announcing school closures of various lengths of time, that the dominoes were starting to fall. One of the things that we had heard from the public health people was the importance of working in coordination with others, that each individual school district doing its own thing was not going to yield an optimal public health result. And so that was one of the reasons we really affixed ourselves to following the advice of the public health office, and who were up to yesterday were telling us to stay open. So as more districts were closing and there was more, I think, perceived pressure to close, I think they felt that their strategy of keeping schools open may not hold even if they didn't issue an order. And so it was better.
You mean that people would hold their kids back?
And that school districts would close. And some districts would close and other people would just hold their kids back. So better to move to a state where it was consistent. And that, we became aware of that this morning. And so, as Don said, Dr. Austin said in his letter to the community, I mean, yesterday, the thing that didn't change was our commitment to following the direction of the Public Health Department. And yesterday the direction was stay open, and that was what we determined to do. Today the direction was closed, and that's what we determined to do.
So just to be clear, the law, you are not bound by recommendations or by the opportunity from the county health department to stay open, but you are bound by their order to close. Is that right? So there was nothing that would prevent the school district from electing to close, much as has happened in these other school districts.
There are conditions under which we can elect to close. I think we have to declare an emergency and have to determine that there are a set of criteria in the regs. And other districts have made those determinations under these circumstances.
Yep. So what role did public pressure play in your consideration or in the broader county decision, in your opinion? You guys have been under a lot of pressure from some members of the community to close the schools for some time now, and that's sort of, although your meeting was scheduled so quickly yesterday that there wasn't much public there, but certainly the social media commentary has been very critical. Did that play any role at all, Shanak or Todd, in sort of the way you thought about this issue? Or was it purely a public health consideration? Or were you looking at it more globally than the public health question, dealing with the educational issues, the impact on families, that sort of thing?
Let me speak from my point of view, and each board member has their own. Our mission as a school district is to educate students. We are not experts in public health. We've got a lot of people who know about education, a lot of education PhDs, people with decades of educational experience, but managing pandemics is outside the scope of what people in school districts, much less people on school boards, know how to do. So we were lucky to find that we had a public health department in our county that seems to have great leadership, had people from the CDC and the state embedded with them, had really seemed to have its act together and have a strategy. So we focused on that. Speaking for myself, that became the kind of the North Star of how we thought about what we should do. Focus on delivering education as long as the county told us that was the right thing to do from a public health point of view. When they changed their direction, it made a lot of sense to change. I understand that people were upset, and we certainly understood that some people wanted to keep their kids home, which is why we took the action that we took yesterday to make it so that we could support those kids more effectively than we had, as the numbers grew, actually support them more effectively. But we're a government agency focused on education, and as long as it's safe and effective to deliver education, I think we're going to try to do that.
I'll come back with a follow-up, but I want to give Shanak a chance to weigh in on this.
Just to follow up on what Todd said, in my opinion, it really isn't prudent for me or elected officials to look at community perception and pressure when making this kind of decision, even though it's important for us to be cognizant of what the community is feeling and making sure that we're communicating with them about all the issues and our decision making. Because I think we've seen at a federal level as well how taking actions that may be at odds with what the public health officials and the epidemiologists are saying can be pretty dangerous in the long term. And so from my point of view, and I said at the board meeting yesterday that, are we really doing the right thing? Are we sure that the information we're getting from county officials is the most accurate? What are we doing to be critical about it? Because we were sort of faced with a little bit of inconsistency between federal, state, and local information. We had, on one hand, the state guidance, which put us at scenario 2, which meant that no school closure is necessarily warranted because there has been no diagnosed case within the school district.
Within the schools. Yeah.
Within the schools. Scenario 3 would be if there is a diagnosed case within the schools, then you would work with the public county health agency to determine whether closure is warranted. Now, there is a lack of testing because, as we know, on a federal level, right? And so there's a situation where who knows if we might have been at scenario 2 or 3, but for everything we knew, we were at scenario 2 and the guidelines were very clear. So it just comes down to really putting our trust in the public health officials, still being critical of them, but at the end of the day, as Todd said, we're not public health officials. We have to trust somebody in this, and they're the ones that we trusted.
So what was the purpose of having an emergency meeting yesterday?
I assume you mean by that, why was it an emergency meeting as opposed to some other kind?
That's part of the question.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I hear you both saying is you're not qualified to make a public health decision. You're going to defer to the public health department. There was therefore no issue facing you yesterday.
Yeah.
So someone chose to have an emergency meeting on a 2-hour notice, which for the most part, the only consequence of that is that it deprived the public to participate in the meeting. So what I'm wondering is what led to the decision to have an emergency meeting when you didn't have anything in front of you to act on?
Sure. A couple of things. One is we were in a period that was a long time between regular board meetings. There was a 3-week break between regular board meetings. So the last time we had a board meeting, we had a 5-minute superintendent's update on coronavirus, and that seemed sufficient to educate the community.
Shows how far we've
come. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it had been in coronavirus years, days. It had been a long time since we had a board meeting. It was actually creating issues of even board communication with the superintendent, because the superintendent obviously was, extremely busy and having trouble communicating with 5 independent board members who weren't all in one place. Mm-hmm. So one issue was just creating an opportunity for board communication and discussion, given how quickly events had moved. A second was the community hadn't seen us and didn't know how decisions were being made. And so in that sense, I think it was a desire to bring some transparency to what are we doing? Is the board and the superintendent aligned on this? Are they not aligned? And in fact, we didn't even know, as you know, because without an opportunity to deliberate in public, we don't have an opportunity to deliberate at all. So we wanted to make sure that there was a clear alignment with the course that the superintendent was laying out. Could it have been a regularly scheduled meeting? Our next meeting is next Tuesday. That seemed like a long time to wait. In retrospect, I think it was good that we didn't wait. We honestly didn't start thinking about having this meeting until the middle of the week. And we were loath to let it go till Friday, because Friday was the beginning of a weekend that we didn't know what was going to happen, and it seemed like a long time to let pass. So in retrospect, if we could have done a special meeting, which was a 24-hour notice.
Well, you could have done an emergency notice with 8 hours notice, emergency meeting with 8 hours notice. But as it was impossible for the public to even know you were meeting.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in actually issuing the notice. There was a decision made probably around 10 o'clock. We had to poll the board members and make sure that there was a majority of the board members had to find that there was an emergency. And so we had to reach out and make sure that people sent their confirmations in. So it took a little time mechanically to get it out, but there was no intent to hold it to the last minute. And we did. I mean, as you know, I really appreciate our partners at Mid-Penn Media, who scrambled the jets to get people down there to record the meeting. And I don't think it was broadcast live. Do you know if it was broadcast live?
It was.
Oh, good. So it was both broadcast live and recorded.
Right.
So and obviously we got notice to the press, and the press was there as well.
Right.
So we wanted the public to see us deliberating and hear the updates that were given. It
just didn't allow the public to share their views.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of families are now scrambling to figure out what they're going to do for the next 2 weeks in terms of childcare. If they're
4 weeks.
4 weeks, sorry. 3 weeks and then spring break.
Yeah, at least.
4 weeks at least.
Are efforts underway to mitigate the impacts for students who rely on free and reduced lunch, after school programs, other kinds of services that the schools provide?
Absolutely. Do you want to?
I mean, right now it's sort of a hodgepodge, because you have all sorts, everybody wants to help, but we don't have a singular infrastructure to actually get food to students in their homes. And so that's something that we're looking at, and we're trying to figure out how exactly we can facilitate that. I know that individually as board members, we're talking to community members and seeing how we can help, but that's part of a larger discussion that we're going to have to see what we can do as a district to help those students, because it's true, there are going to be a fair number of students here who aren't going to have access to the meals that they need, to childcare, and that's another discussion we have to have, because we're going to have school facilities that are empty, and we're going to have parents at work, and we're going to need to really discuss how we take care of those students.
So I can shed a little more light on certainly the food distribution part. We're going to have, and I think this is what most districts are doing, we're going to have pickup availability for breakfast and lunch for people who are free and reduced lunch eligible, free and reduced breakfast and lunch eligible. And it's not clear, I think we're figuring out whether it's at our traditional Title I schools, which have the majority of the low-income kids, or if it's at schools that have kitchens, which are a slightly different, not entirely overlapping subset. And I think that we're going to try to figure that out today and communicate to the families what the pickup strategy was. In addition, another area related to what you said is we've got about 600 kids who live in East Palo Alto. And some of those kids are also free and reduced lunch eligible. So one of the issues that we've got to address is how to get, it is not a good solution to say, hey, good news, you can come pick up your lunch. It's over at Addison School, come over anytime and pick it up. Mm-hmm. So we've got to figure out how to deliver meals in that community. And we're actually in touch with the Ravenswood School District to see if we can work with them to use, because they're also using a local school distribution strategy, and see if we can distribute at their schools along with them.
And I don't think we mentioned it at the beginning that the Ravenswood School District just announced today that they're shutting down, right? For
similar period of time.
2 weeks.
I don't know if it's 2 or 3.
This is from Todd.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, we just learned that San Mateo County has ordered all of its schools to close. So it may be that Ravenswood is simply acting on that directive. So before we went on the air here, there was a brief mention of the child care problem that will result from this. Not all families have the means to scramble to get care for their kids. And if there's ever a reason to have an emergency board meeting, that might be it.
Yeah.
But what is being done to try to anticipate this tremendous need that's going to exist now? So the schools have not focused on that problem yet. I think it is one that we're going to get to. We're going to start getting into it probably this weekend. The focus has been on educational mission and focusing on the closure. I mean, we basically realized we were going to close on Monday for 3 weeks today. One of the things that I've been heartened by is, and I was on a call with all the PTA leaders from our sites this afternoon, right before this meeting, and several people mentioned, hey, we've got people at our school who are trying to figure out how to organize to deliver services and support to the families that need it, both in our community and in other communities. And I think, so what's happening is these people, the community, as our community so often does, kind of recognizes the need and sort of rises up. The issue is going to be how to organize and channel those issues. And, you were saying to me before the meeting, it's like, that's something there's a question about, is that something the schools can take on? Maybe it is. I mean, I'd love to see the schools be able to do that. Right now, we've got our hands full just meeting our education mission. Well, you made the point that the new gathering requirements now restrict over 30, as I understand
35.
it, right?
35
35
with certain conditions.
Right. So the facility availability to handle all the kids that are going to need to be cared for are going to be tremendous. And it just strikes me as obvious that schools have classrooms.
Yep.
Classrooms can, play a big role, and perhaps one or more schools can be available.
I think that's a great idea. One of the things that's hampered us, that I think is another thing that's going to change soon, is, as you guys know, there's a lot of regulation that governs how schools behave, both to deliver services and in terms of administration of public property and so on. And in fact, we just suspended all outside uses of our facilities. What was it, last week?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A week ago, we kicked everybody off of our campuses. So now, one of the things that we think is likely to happen is the governor has in front of him a set of asks from the school districts that include waiver of a number of these requirements. That some of them cover instruction, some of them cover facilities, some of them cover the way we handle financial matters with our staff. And if those waivers come through, that will really loosen it up for us to do some of the things that we would find it hard to do, like saying, hey, can we organize child care at our facilities? So we're kind of crossing our fingers right now that we're going to get the waivers that we're looking for. And that, I think, will help us move.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I will just say, too, I mean, we have a great opportunity to really utilize the partnerships that we have with other childcare providers like PAC, and also our relationship with the city. Because the city has a number of childcare providers that they, if not partner with, are connected with. And so this is a fine time, the best time, really, to come together and see how we can help each other and help the community.
Is the Palo Alto Community Childcare after-school childcare program, which exists at every school site, every elementary school site, is that contract with the school district or the city? Who contracts with them to provide the childcare services?
We have a contract with them that is related to low-income students. I think otherwise what they're doing is they're renting the facilities from us, and they contract directly with the parents to the kids. So I don't think.
Okay, so your agreement is, because that dates all the way back to the school closure days, right, and the development agreement not to compete, or not to develop. Right. Thank you. So if the school district already has an existing contractual relationship with PAC, it seems like that's sort of a great avenue to explore.
Yeah. I'm going to start on that right after we finish this.
Because it seems to me that the fear here would be people inefficiently trying to duplicate effort, and there be no real coordinating effort.
Yeah, I really agree. I was on the phone with Mayor Fine when I was sitting in your green room, basically talking about that.
Folks at home, we don't have a green room.
Talking about how can we coordinate across the city and the schools to help the organizations in the community and just the people in the community find each other and organize. Because I think right now everybody's kind of running around trying to figure out, and what's incredible is how many people are like, their number one thought is, how can I help? How can I support? How can we, deliver something to meet this need? We've got to help those people find each other and kind of come up with some organizational infrastructure to hang those efforts off.
I wanted to ask about the learning alternatives that are going to be provided to students. Are there more specifics available about that? Like if I'm a gun high school student on Monday, what am I going to be doing?
I can talk about that. For next week, there are the alternative or flexible learning strategy that we were talking about on Thursday. It seems like forever ago. It was yesterday afternoon, are going out to kids today.
Okay.
And those consist of what in the old days we'd call packets. Some of it's online, some of it's paper, but it's basically work that you can do at home on your own. And some of it, it's grade appropriate and age appropriate. On Monday, the entire the PAUSD staff is actually all coming in. All the instructional leaders at the high schools are getting together to work out what the e-learning strategy is going to be over the extended closure. And one of the big things is with if we're able to get the waivers that we're looking for from the governor, which really was a material barrier. It basically said, it governs things like IEPs and 504s. If we can't meet the requirements of IEPs and 504s, IEPs are for special education students, then we can't just say, hey, we'll meet these kids' needs, but not these kids' needs. We have to meet everybody's needs. And that really limited our ability to do things like online education, because we would not be able to meet everybody's needs equally. If the waivers come through on that, that really changes the way we think about what we're going to be able to do. And instead we're saying, what can we do? Instead of how do we duplicate, meet everybody's needs and rights exactly the way we did it before. Now it's like, how do we do the best we can with the resources that we have? So I think on Monday next week, the staff is going to work on delivering that, and then there'll be messaging toward the end of next week about how the future weeks are going to unfold.
How would that work for a special education student that might have an aide or, in-person reliant services?
It's really hard. Education, there's no such thing as a typical special education student, as you know. There are kids with mild, moderate, and severe disabilities and of all different types that have all kinds of different needs. For kids that are moderate and severe, who often have aides that are spending a lot of time with them during the day, it's going to be very challenging to deliver in-home services. And some districts I know around the country, I don't know about in California, have developed drop-off learning centers that basically accommodate those kids. I don't know if that's under California law that's going to be permissible, but that's one of the things that we are looking at as well. For kids that have milder disabilities, it's not clear. It'll depend on the disability what the at-home strategy is going to be. But yeah, special education it's super hard. It's not easy to deliver at the best of times. It's very hard to deliver in these times.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of students and their parents out there that have a million questions about how this will affect things like course credits and testing,
APs.
Are there any
graduation?
Yeah, the whole thing. I mean, there's so many questions.
Well, I finished my courses and be able to graduate this year.
Right. So how is that getting addressed?
Well, these are questions that everybody's going to have across the entire state because by tomorrow, by the end of the week, it's very likely we see everyone closed. And so it's suddenly going to become a very common problem and a state level problem, which means there's going to be a state level solution. So, which is great because for things like requirements, you need a state level solution. Yeah. So we're, I think, very soon going to be able to see some clear guidance about what exactly the solution is. And then we'll definitely be making sure the district is communicating with the parents to get the information out there.
So your assumption, I assume, is that the state will do what it needs to do to basically waive requirements that will enable kids to not have their academic record or future plans sidetracked or interrupted because of this?
That's my expectation.
I mean, do you think there's anybody that would resist that at the state level?
I doubt it very much.
Yeah.
I mean, by coincidence, we were on the phone with Tony Thurmond, the superintendent of instruction, about Palo Alto's determination about opting out of the CASP test,
right,
which kind of falls into this category. What do you do with something like that? And there was no doubt that he was in a problem-solving mode. He was not in a mode of, you can't do that yet. Reg says you have to do it this way. It was, hey, I understand your problem. Let me work on how we can solve that problem.
Yeah.
I think all the things that Shaunak just mentioned all fall into that same category. And, Tony Thurmond is the governor's, right hand on education matters. He runs the CDE.
Yeah.
I think the solutions will start to flow. The key thing is, Shaunak put it exactly right, I thought. There are 1,000 school districts in California, right? So if you're one school district and you close, you've got every one of these problems. Now 1,000 school districts all have the same problem, and there are a lot of people working on solving them. Mm-hmm. And our job is primarily to implement the solutions, not to invent them.
Mm-hmm. We haven't talked about teachers and staff at all, and I think that's an important constituency, obviously. You've got labor agreements, and you've got staff that obviously is in the vulnerable, many of which are in that vulnerable population in terms of this health problem. What happens to them? I know the announcement that Don made today, or I guess it was today, is asking everybody to report to work on Monday. It was a little more. It was quite fuzzy on what happens
on call
after that,
Tuesday through Friday.
Yeah, so, and then it was sort of silent after that.
And on Friday, the message that I received was on Monday, all hands report. We organize and sort. Everybody's on call for the rest of the week. And on call doesn't mean sitting at home. It means on Monday, some people were told you're coming in. Other people will be told not to come in. By Friday, we'll message everybody again and say what we think what the expectation is, certainly for the next week and possibly for the future weeks as well. So it's a little bit of a rolling strategy, which necessary under the times.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to. You mentioned how important taking care of the staff is. We've got about 2,000 employees, and there is no school without school employees. And so our taking care of these employees and making sure that they have they have continuity, that they're able to do their work, that they're able to deliver services to students when and how we need them to in these unusual times. That's really one of the things that the staff internally is focusing the most on. Because if we lose the capability of our employees, all the good intentions and all the good ideas of the world aren't going to make any difference at all. It's all about teachers and classified staff delivering services to students.
And that they're able to do it safely. Because we know that a lot of our staff and teachers are in the high-risk category. And that's been a concern that they've had.
Yeah.
Well, so, simple question. Will they be getting paid 3 weeks from now?
I hope so. I know for the certificated staff, I believe the answer is yes. For the classified staff, I'm not sure. One of the things, frankly, that I learned at the Ravenswood School Board meeting last night is that they felt that there were regulations that prevented them from paying their classified staff if classified staff was not reporting to work. I hadn't heard that over here, and I don't know if it's correct or not, but there's clearly a lot to be worked out about how you're going to handle this during a government employees during a furlough period. And we're working on it.
Well, it's been a crazy week. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. And for those of you at home, we'll be covering this story as we have been for the last few weeks. And stay in touch with PaloAltoOnline.com for breaking news when it happens. So thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.